Good afternoon. I hope that the majority of you, if not all of you, were at the earlier session we had this morning with our speaker, first with Amy Hess, and then the fireside chat, and more recently the poster session this afternoon. The symposium will continue tomorrow with some very interesting panels following our second keynote by George Kurtz. But today we're wrapping up with a featured technical presentation. And by way of introduction, you can find an awful lot about Josh online if you look, including some really excellent video presentations. He's a very sought-after speaker in a number of different fora. And one reason I sometimes talk about how we have tribes in our field, and one set of tribes, or one tribe, is those of us in academia who do advanced research and academic work. Another tribe is the group in government that have various policy issues, military intelligence, similar. A third tribe is the one out in the world of commerce that actually has to build and deploy solutions and listen to immediate customer needs and build to those. A fourth tribe are those who are a combination of hobbyist, gray hat, black hat, a number of people who are out working not necessarily to support a business or in the sense of research from an academic realm, but probing its systems. And there are probably others. But what's notable about these is there are very few individuals who cross tribal boundaries, who are present to give talks, or who are sought after to speak and discuss with individuals who know some of the players in each of those arenas. Josh is one of the people who is sought after to speak across these boundaries, who does participate and know the various parties involved. And when you hear him talk today, you'll get a sense of why that is. He's got a background where he's worked as an analyst, security analyst for ISS. He then went and joined the 451 group as a security analyst. This is one of the premier groups analyzing commercial solutions, providing advice to customers. And from there, he went and became the director of security strategy at Akamai, a net services company that all of you use on a regular basis, even if the name isn't immediately familiar. And very recently has joined a startup, Sonatype. I don't know if you'll be talking about that or not, but you can talk to him tomorrow if you're interested in hearing more about that and his transition into the startup realm. But without further ado, let's all welcome Josh Corman.
All right, thank you. I'm so happy to be here, and I've been a longtime fan of Spaff. It was amazing to finally start talking to him a few years back over fine whiskeys of the world at the RSA conference, and now to be here. So it's really interesting journey to go from like reading the things that someone like Spaff and his illustrious trail of students have produced, and now to be here is really a nice milestone. So hopefully we're all awake and caffeinated enough from a very thought-provoking day. The nice part is we get to use our brains. The hard part is we feel exhausted throughout the day. Mostly, I've been waiting since the Batman Begins movie to be able to, or the Dark Knight movie to be able to say this. So I finally said it. There you go. Why so serious? Been a long-time fan of CERIAS because it's really, as far as I can tell, the only multidisciplinary approach to this problem. And while there's certainly technical chops in the community, I think it's the attitude or the recognition that this is going to take a village to raise this child, or it's going to take a number of disciplines. I want to encourage and even extend, right? So no matter how multidisciplinary it is at its current state, one of the things I asked at dinner last night was, if you could add one new discipline, what would it be and why? I've been an advocate for introducing things like sociology, psychology, anthropology into the cybersecurity arena because I don't think our bottlenecks are technical. It's not that I don't respect and admire all the great crypto work or all the great research projects. I absolutely do. but we are struggling. Our bottleneck is really struggling to get the outside world to adopt and successfully deploy these technologies. But to the serious point, pardon the pun, I already apologized to Victor. I have been getting more serious, and I've been getting more assertive in my tone. You know, a lot of the people that do the private sector research community, or the hacker community, so to speak, you know, I am not now, nor have I ever been a hacker, but I live among them, and I'm what you get when you put a philosophy guy in a hacker culture for 13 years. But I have trended to more serious, and I have gone from just watching and doing it because it was our hobby. One of the things we noticed is that a lot of us started in this profession because it was a hobby, and when we weren't paying attention, it became our career. But we're now in a third wave where, while we weren't paying attention, software and technology, connected technology, permeates every single aspect of your life. From the time you left your house this morning, you touched dozens of operating systems you didn't even realize were there. It's in our cars, it's in our medical devices, it's in our homes. And I've grown from frustrated with this to concerned about it to outspoken about it to downright aggressive about my tone. And there's a reason for that. And what I'm going to do is give you a slightly more technical version than I gave to TED. But I did a TEDx this past fall. I wanted it to be something that my neighbor could understand. Now, the good news is you're slightly more technical, and I don't have an 18-minute time limit, so I'm going to give you a slightly different delivery. But one of the things that the security profession and the hacker community, and I would assume the same is true for academia, one of the things we really need to be able to do is communicate better. You know, we have a lot of knowledge. We are horrible at conveying that knowledge or catalyzing action. And one of the reasons is we tell people what to do, but it's not practical or implementable, or we haven't really explained why to do it. So I'm going to warm us up a little bit. You know, Sam Lyles wanted me to give a talk on my anonymous research, so perhaps you'll get some questions on that. I didn't include a ton of it. Someone else wanted me to do my cyber war talk, because I talk about cyber war from a non-state actor or a ideological adversary perspective, and that's not necessarily going to be in here as well. I think after listening this morning, what I really want to drive home through this presentation is why we have to make leaps and bounds and step function growth in our approach to security, and why we need to communicate better to other stakeholders who aren't as technical as we are. So that's what I'm going to aim at, but I hope to leave enough time that we can get to those other questions and topics if you like. So I called it Swimming with Sharks, Security in the Internet of Things. You'll see why in a moment. And by the way, that is my Twitter handle, and if you're not on Twitter, it's going to be hard to be a vibrant participant in the security community. But go ahead and send me comments or tweet things. I mean, this is how we're getting scale in the industry, is when people don't know of a new research piece or a researcher, sometimes associating it with these talks is helpful. And I'm going to hopefully give you a little bit of a thumbnail of what the cavalry is. But this is a talk I gave at TEDx. So essentially, I've been in love with the ocean for my entire life. Before there was Shark Week on every year on the Discovery Channel, I used to watch all the Jacques Cousteau specials. I loved it so much, in fact, that the second I could get in the water and go scuba diving or snorkeling, I did. I actually went to school originally to be a marine biologist. At UNH, they had the Woods Hole Institute that I could participate in. And I was self-funding, and it was interesting, but I woke up one day and I realized I knew every Latin name for every single snail. And I didn't feel challenged, especially not for the cost of self-funding your education. So ultimately, I switched to philosophy, and now I'm a professional in the cybersecurity world. But I still love the ocean. So when David Litchfield, a world-class researcher and shark photographer, asked me to go on a dive right before DEF CON this summer, I jumped at it. I've seen sharks before on dives, but never deliberately chummed the waters and tried to get up-close encounters. So this is essentially, you know, we went down off the coast of Cape Cod, a couple hours in the boat. You know, you can swim in the ocean for hours at a time and never see a shark, right? They're kind of always there, but they're not interested in you per se. But it's remarkable. We put chum in the water, you know, just a little bit of frozen chum, and within a few minutes, this little guy showed up. This is a blue shark. You know, we'd hoped to see some great whites that day, but we never did. Not necessarily my favorite shark of all the different species of shark. My dream is to see a hammerhead, but it's still pretty large. It was graceful. It moved effortlessly, and I now know why they call it a blue shark, because you can't really tell in the photos, but the sunlight hitting the back of that thing is just breathtaking. It's electric. Now, maybe you think I'm an idiot here, but you know, that's part of the story here. I mean, that's part of the message, is that we tried to get several other security researchers to come on the shark dive with us. And everyone had these polite and convenient excuses about why they didn't want to come with Dave and I. But my boss at the time, Andy Ellis at Akamai, he was much more direct. He basically challenged, what kind of an idiot gets in the water with an apex predator? Right? I mean, everyone makes risk-reward decisions, right? We all make cost-benefit decisions every single day. And for most people, they don't really want to take this risk. But I love the ocean so much, I love sharks, so I said, I'm going to take that risk. Now, I was really on a adrenaline high at this point. You know, it's beautiful. And I figured I was pretty safe in that cage, right? Now, for those who think I was an idiot for getting in the water with an apex predator, Dave took the photo. Right? And you know, we have this cliche, and it is an increasingly dangerous cliche in the security industry that you don't have to swim faster than the shark, just faster than your buddy. And that's not true, because one of the things, for one reason, you know, we forget the sharks also have buddies. So what was one shark quickly became 2, then 3, then 4, then around 5. You know, actually at this point, Dave got back in the cage because you can't keep track of more than one at a time. They move too quick. And they were nippy. They were taking bites at us. So even though I was in the protection of that cage, they're pretty aggressive. You know, they're in an agitated state. And it was incredibly clear to me why people thought that we were idiots. Because this is their natural territory. They are masters of this domain. It's not a fair fight. If I were to encounter one of these guys in the open water, I'd be toast, right? Defenseless, prone. And of course you'd have to be an idiot to put yourself in that kind of threat context. Now, if you think that was a scary dive, this is Dave's prior dive. In fact, I think he got this picture in National Geographic. And we're going to go again right before DEF CON this summer if anyone wants to join us. But you know, there's a primal and visceral fear, and it's a healthy one, right? We have an evolutionary fear of this. Right? We're afraid of snakes for similar reasons. It's a self-preservation instinct. So it's something to pay attention to. Now, Dave is not a shark photographer. If you don't know Dave Litchfield, he's one of the world's best breakers. He is a white hat hacker. He hacks. He was the bane of the Microsoft's existence for many years, beating on the Microsoft platform. More famously, he moved on to Oracle. So Oracle has posters of him throughout the hallways. They claim that they respect him, but he caused them a lot of pain. And he's a wonderful world-class breaker. Now, I've never been a hacker. I said that earlier. But I have kind of taken my marine biology skills, and I've become a marine biologist of hackers, right? I think my specialty, if I really squint back at my career, is I study the various species of sharks, right? The various classes of adversaries. I look at their motivational structure. I look at their preferred asset types that they go after, or what their natural food and prey might look like. And then I look at their tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs as a term of art. And I study that, and I watch their evolutions over time. And so as we got back in the boat, and we were heading in the 2.5 hour boat ride home, our conversation did turn to cybersecurity, and just how tough it's gotten, and just how badly we're losing. So for the prior year, I'd kind of been asking, are we getting better? How would we know? You know, are we getting better, getting worse, or staying about the same? And we lack good criteria to answer that question. But I felt like after enough probing, I had finally got to a place where I knew that, no, we are in fact losing. So maybe you didn't think I was an idiot for getting in the water with sharks, but a lot of my friends thought I was an idiot for studying these guys. This is some custom artwork I had done for our Building a Better Anonymous series, where I spent 1.5 years researching the hacker collective known as Anonymous. And early on, they attacked anyone who offended their sensibilities with impunity. So many friends and family thought I was an idiot. You know, might as well have been swimming sharks to study these guys. But I had to do it because I could tell that it was consequential. This was different. It was changing the game in a number of ways. And while the hacker or white hat research community was unimpressed with their technique or their skill and very dismissive of them, they were important for several reasons, but 2 of them matter for today's discussion. Number 1, they revealed to the world that hacking power existed and was available to anyone who wanted to wield it. So it democratized the existence of what was once a dark art that only a few of us knew how to use, and most of us were too ethical to use it improperly. But also, despite their lack of finesse or skill, they were wildly successful. One of the things we covered was the 50-day summer of lulls, where LulzSec went on a 50-day rampage, taking down everyone in their path. And while we mocked them for lacking sophistication, they were successful in almost every case. And it was one of the things I said is it held a mirror to our neglect, and it showed just how poorly we've operationalized basic security. Because what we were defending against was a different adversary from a different era, and we hadn't really modernized to see that while they're easy to defeat, we hadn't yet successfully or pervasively deployed that. So it was a real wake-up call, in my opinion. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, and some of the folks I talked to earlier today will also understand another game changer was the term of advanced persistent threat, which makes me nauseous to even say out loud. One of my favorite papers of the 451 group, I call it an adaptive persistent adversary. I felt the word advanced meant nothing, and threat was too ambiguous or confusing. And as tomorrow's keynote will say, you don't have a malware problem, you have an adversary problem. So really, I want to focus centrally on the real difference and nuance here wasn't the projectiles or the ammunition used by a state-sponsored espionage actor or well-funded actor. What was different was that they were target sticky, they were tenacious. So back to that, you don't have to swim faster than the shark. This particular one's coming after you, right? There's a level of target stickiness. So target sticky, in fact, that if you think of the RSA Secure ID breach, that was not the primary target. The primary target was a defense contractor. They were so tenacious that when they failed in their initial campaign to get in the front door, they went up the supply chain to the security products used, compromised them, and then went back. So these are multi-year, very patient, very determined, very aggressive, and target sticky. And this also changed the rules. So, the first time I mentioned this briefly this morning on the fireside chat, but the net result is we are losing on every front, despite our best and brightest. We're having more than a breach a week. We're having several breaches per week. And honestly, I could care less about the credit card breaches. It's not that they don't matter, it's that they matter so much less than other areas of weakness and dependence. And really what it comes down to is just the basis of reality that offense is easy. And we kind of know this, but we never said it so plainly to the mainstream media or to policymakers on the Hill. Like, they don't understand how could Target possibly have been breached. Well, they have a false belief that we're all pretty close to secure. It's just every once in a while someone gets the best of us. The truth is we're light years from doing enough security. I mean, one of the harsh realities I came to is that best practices aren't, and that good enough security isn't anymore. If you think about it, our best practices, what we've codified and put into standards like the PCI Data Security Standard or SOX or other different paint by numbers checklists approach, that's a brittle, static checklist in the face of a dynamic, adaptive adversary. Of course it doesn't work. Those checklists, in fact, if they ever worked, were predicated on a 2003 definition of IT, of business models, and of adversaries. We have far more adversaries with very different motivational structures, and the way we do and deploy our IT is so fundamentally different, it's actually become a liability to clutch to those best practices. In fact, if I wanted to weaken the national security of an enemy nation state, I would develop something like PCI and give it to them. So, essentially, if this is the state of nature and we are in the face of apex predators and we don't have our shark cages, it's not surprising that we're having the net results that we're having. Now, but here's the bad news, and this is why I'm getting more serious. When we got back to harbor, my natural instinct was felt a little bit safer to be out of the cage and back on the boat, but I didn't really feel safe until I got to the safety of dry land, right? I had to get back to land. That's where I felt like I was no longer in the domain of those apex predators. But here I am walking to my 2013 model brand new high-tech enabled car, and I realize, the Internet of Things is like a tsunami, right? We're swimming in a sea of connectivity. We have software stacks and connectivity on nearly every device in our life, increasingly so day by day. And just like the ocean, this Internet of Things, this swirling sea, also has apex predators. So what kind of an idiot gets in the water with apex predators? All of us. It's just we're not as conscious or aware of it. So this is not my car, but imagine it is for a moment. I get in, and the first thing I have to do is call my two girls and tell them that I wasn't eaten by a shark. That was my promise, right? They're worried all day. I didn't turn the key. I hit the ignition button. And what happens next? The operating system boots up. Is it an operating system that we trust or that we make fun of? Right? And then I see my Bluetooth connection to my phone. And then I see the album information fetched over the internet. I'm driving a computer on wheels, not just a computer, several computers on wheels. So the second call I made was not to my kids, it was to Dr. Charlie Miller, because I knew that in 2 weeks' time at the Hacker Conference at DEF CON, he was going to reveal that he and Chris Balasek had hacked 2 automobiles. They were ultimately reveal it on Forbes.com has a video of the journalist driving the car while they're hacking it. And for these 2 cars, they were able to do a number of parlor tricks, some more serious than others. But things they could do is they could lie about your speed, because it's all software defined. That's not that big a deal, except for the fact that certain safety precautions depend upon a certain speed limit. They could do things like tug on the seatbelt, like you would have if you had a car accident. They didn't do it, thank goodness, but they could deploy the airbags while he was driving. In fact, a recent show on television did that. They deployed airbags while driving. But here's where it started to freak out the journalists. They could also, because of the parking assist functionality. Now, I'm a techie guy. I know that my car is highly software enabled. I didn't realize just how enabled until this video. Because of the parking assist functionality, he turned the steering wheel without the driver's intervention. Almost certain to cause an accident. I'm not comfortable with my steering column being controlled by software. Now, maybe I should be. Maybe I'm a Luddite, right? Maybe I'm going to be the old guy saying, get off my lawn. But that level of dependence is very disconcerting to me. And for their final act, they waited till he was in the safety of a field, but they disabled the brakes. That brake pedal is not physical. They shut off his brakes. Okay? So that level of dependence would be okay if I felt comfortable that safety engineering principles and separation and isolation and segregation were there. But now that I know so much about how a car area network bus works, or a CAN bus, it's one flat network. Every node talks to every other node. There's not even a source and destination IP address. One of the responses from one of the vendors, I believe it was Cisco, said that they're going to introduce firewalls and IDS and IPS, which is anathema. It doesn't work that way. And God, I hope we don't put signature antivirus in every single one of our cars, right? We know instinctually that these things don't work in our enterprise. They don't belong in a place that can affect your children or your personal physical safety. So initially, of all the different ways I tried to answer the question of are we getting better, worse, or staying the same, I ultimately came to this is my best answer. Our dependence on technology is growing faster than our ability to secure it. I'm going to say that one more time. Our dependence on technology is growing faster than our ability to secure it. Now, aside from Charlie and a few others, almost none of our best and brightest are even considering the security of these. We are so concerned over the Target breach or Neiman Marcus or something else for a highly replaceable credit card that very, very, very few of our researchers and our luminaries are thinking about things that affect public safety and human life. So I'm hoping to do something about that. So it's not just in our cars. Jay Radcliffe is a diabetic himself, and a few years back he had hacked his insulin pump and revealed it at Black Hat and DEF CON. He went to the manufacturer, who basically told him it functioned as designed, or that they had passed FDA approval. He then went to the FDA, and they said, well, no one's really been killed yet, it's already approved, so we'll think about this in future guidance. So he gave up, and he went to a second manufacturer. Well, another year and a half passed, and he hacked that one, and he presented that this past summer at DEF CON as well. And he depends upon this for his life. A glitch in the software actually almost killed him, had not for his wife woken him up. He gave him too much insulin after a battery change. So he brought that one to the FDA, got a very similar answer. Once again, we have a Bluetooth stack on an insulin pump which can give you a lethal dose of insulin. In fact, similar research was done by the late Barnaby Jack, who died tragically about 2 weeks before Black Hat and DEF CON. One of the greatest losses in the research community, because he was actually looking at car security and medical device security. But essentially, neither one of them were able to get and impress upon the Food and Drug Administration that this was a viable and credible threat. So I asked Kevin Fu, a PhD who studies medical device security, why the heck is there a Bluetooth stack on an insulin pump? You don't need it. It's an elective attack surface. It adds complexity, it adds attack surface. Just plug a wire in if you want to give it an update. And he said, Josh, it's the bacon principle. Everything's better with bacon, everything's better with Bluetooth. So as soon as the first vendor put one there, every vendor put one there. It doesn't matter that it actually puts you at a greater risk. It's just not a sound risk decision. And very few people using these devices understand that. Jay had a much more nuanced answer to no one's died yet. He said, how would you know? Diabetics die of too much or too little insulin. How would you know? Is there forensically sound logging on these? No. So this elective attack surface and the unsatisfactory replies he's gotten from the FDA and industry has now led him to a risk decision where he no longer will wear an insulin pump. He's gone back to manual injections. Now he knows that because he's a white hat hacker. Does the average citizen know that?
Who is this?
Jay Radcliffe. Yep. It's also in our homes, right? So it's in our cars, it's on our bodies, but it's in our homes. The Internet of Things, as cliche a term as that is, and I'm expecting Spaff's going to make a Samuel L. Jackson markup of the Internet of Things. But you know, these are cameras like the iZone that was hacked, or the TrendNet camera. These are the Nest thermostats. These are web-connected refrigerators. These, you know, I'm a little less concerned their fridge is sending spam, even though that story was actually debunked. But I'm a lot more concerned about the baby monitor being used to both listen in on and speak to your children when you're not home. I'm a whole lot more concerned about these touch locks, which you can open through proximity with your iPhone or your iDevice or your cell phone and near-field communications. We buy these technologies to keep bad guys out of our homes, and they're trivially subverted to let guys into our homes. So the guys at TrustWave had hacked a bunch of these home electronics and home automation systems and home security systems. So I see these commercials that everyone sees about how you can turn on or unlock your doors from your boardroom meeting, but we haven't really considered a full analysis of how secure those are. Many of the early attempts to hack those have been successful, trivially successful. I'm a little less concerned about people turning your fridge temperature up and down to rot your food or to spy on what these kind of things. But you know, as I say that, it is a little concerning if you're concerned about privacy, and the focus of the cavalry is so far been primarily focused on safety. But one of the guys who's been hacking Internet of Things for a while, he's worked on a lot of these major appliances, and he found bits of code where they actually have code that's there to send usage statistics of your refrigerator and the kind of food you're eating to your insurer to adjust your premiums. So if you're a diabetic and you're having too many sweets, or if you have weight problems and whatnot, I didn't know how that worked, but there's already code in one of these refrigerators to tattletale on you for your premium adjustments. Again, not my primary concern, but a bigger concern is when we try to get Microsoft or Adobe or whatnot, or Oracle to be more sincere and more diligent on their software development life cycles, it took years. There are hundreds of vendors in the Internet of Things, and if you start thinking about Indiegogo and Kickstarter projects, there are thousands, and none of them have CISOs or chief security officers. So as more of these permeate, there are increased listening devices or things that could put you in harm's way. And then there's the public infrastructure. So if you don't know Shodan, and apparently very, very few people do, you don't even have to be a hacker to take down power systems or the elevator bay in a hotel or the boiler room in your children's school. If you do a search on Shodan, these are industrial control systems directly connected to the internet, often with default usernames and passwords. No hacking skill required whatsoever. This is a simple search on PLC, which is a programmable logic controller. You'll get answers like Honeywell and Rockwell and a lot of these industrial control systems, but you could search for other terms as well. And it's stunning just how many systems are directly connected to the internet. Now, a lot of these systems in isolation, you know, they were never expected to be connected to the internet, so they didn't have any sort of logical controls. They expected guards, guns, and dogs to protect an air gap. But now that there's, you know, everything's on the internet, there's way too many answers. I long for the day when Shodan returns nothing. Right now, you can search even on your phone, and you'll find way too much. So this is usually the point in the conversation when one of the hackery type people stands up and accuses me of spreading FUD, right? Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I have a healthy allergy. I can't stand FUD. Nick Selby once called FUD is, what do you say? FUD is the bastion of the weak. It's a very common tactic used to sell snake oil to people when they're afraid, right? And a lot of the security industry is highly guilty of this. In fact, I usually have a game I play with first-time security people going to the RSA security conference, and I tell them to walk around the show floor and tell me who the 3 sleaziest vendors are. And they pretty much get it right every single time. I'm not going to tell you which 3. But you know, when you don't have merit, you usually talk about fear. But here's the thing. I think our community has over-rotated on this. Just because it's scary doesn't mean it isn't true. So, you know, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not going to smash my devices. I started this conversation saying everything's a cost benefit. So we adopt these technologies for their obvious, immediate benefits. We just have less visible and less obvious costs. And you can't properly do that cost-benefit equation without knowing more. So I'm going to hijack FUD, and essentially I'm redefining it as I want you to have facts. That's it. If there's an elective attack surface of Bluetooth on that device, and there's an equally priced, equally functioned competitor with less attack surface and less risk, who's been more diligent about a software development lifecycle, I want you to know that. Let free market forces do this. I'm not trying to dictate the solution, but it's not inappropriate to discuss the facts, and they're very poorly known. And then, like I said, some urgency here because that dependence has exceeded our risk management, so we're way behind, and then demanding more visibility. So the simple answer to what has to be done is I have no clue. But I am one of those guys who likes to fail fast and iterate. So here was an early failure or iteration. A few years back, I basically, I think it was 6 years ago at this point now, I had this instinct that security people could never secure anything. By the time a security person inherits the project or the environment, they're inheriting the downstream consequences made by the CIO and the CTO, and it may not be defensible. Right? It may be too late for us to band-aid and put aftermarket security on things. And that's a hyperbolic statement, but it's not that far from the truth. And I said, let's go further upstream. So I wrote what was essentially the Hippocratic Oath, or an attempt to be a Hippocratic Oath for software developers. David Rice and I and Jeff Williams, we wrote the Rugged Manifesto. We looked at the Agile Manifesto, Agile replacing the waterfall development methodology. And we couldn't find the word risk or security or threat or adversary or any sort of security-related terms in it. And we decided to make an alternative. And it wasn't that we were going to come up with a brand new development methodology. Developers do what developers do. It's that we wanted to at least plant the seed that what they were doing potentially had consequences. And I'll let you read it at your leisure, but let's go to that Bluetooth insulin pump example. This one line could have been a difference maker. Right? For those listening in at home, I recognize that my code will be attacked by talented and persistent adversaries who threaten our physical, economic, and national security. It's not that these people are irresponsible. It's that in their design, they didn't factor the presence of an adversary. Simply acknowledging that people may seek to undermine this design decision may have led to a different one. Perhaps they'd have the Bluetooth stack for some business reason that was justifiable, but perhaps it'd be off by default. Now, while it was true and while it's been successful and while several universities and private sector folks have deployed many of the things in the Rugged Handbook and the implementation guide, it was an incomplete truth. What we've basically started to figure out is the greater truth is this can't be solved by security alone. It can't be solved by development and security alone. It's a public safety issue. It's about public good, therefore the public needs to be involved. So we're starting to realize that we have to expand further than just the people who write the software and defend the software. So the newest response is called the cavalry, or rather I am the cavalry. And this came out of me thinking naively for many, many years. Staff would have laughed at me, and he's about to. But I truly believed in my heart that if I could build up enough personal credibility and get the right message and the right concern for the right stakeholder, they'd fix it. And about a year and a half ago, I got as high and deep as one can get. And we got in front of the right people. And they can't fix it. Either they don't get it, or they don't feel empowered, or this just isn't something that will pass through the meat grinder and politics and partisan and budget. And it was a very sobering and disappointing moment. It was also a very empowering one, because if you know the cavalry isn't coming, then it falls to us. Right? I looked everywhere for the adults in the room, and there aren't any. So last year at DEF CON, at great personal risk, we sent out our clarion call, and we basically said, all you hackers, you have to be the adults. We have to step up and lead. If the person isn't sitting to your left, or your right, or in your chair, they're not going to come fix this. And I alluded to this morning, but essentially, senators and congressmen and people in the intelligence community, they're no more experts on fracking or stem cell research than they are in cyber. Why do we expect them to be the experts on this? It was very silly. So now we're in a new stage of silly where we're going to try to be a technically literate voice of reason, a non-commercial voice of reason, and engage directly with public policy and the mainstream media. So we have a deliberate, concerted effort to do things that affect public safety and human life, and we're calling it I am the cavalry. So the paths forward, well, we know we're probably starting too late, even though some people think we're starting too early. And we know we're going to make mistakes. But we know it's time to do it because we're adrift. and prone at sea in the Internet of Things, and blood is in the water. So, our response at the moment, which I'm going to define more casually in a moment, is initially started as an idea. We basically sent out a call at DEF CON and said, if you think this isn't crazy, if you want to help, join us in a month and a half in Louisville, Kentucky at the conference known as DerbyCon, and we're going to hold our first constitutional congress for hackers, where we're going to determine identity, our mission, vision, and goals. And we didn't know if anybody would show up or if we'd be mocked and ridiculed because we're a fairly cynical crowd. We had 100 people on their own dime go to Louisville, Kentucky and lock themselves in a room for 2 days. So we knew that it resonated. It spoke to the parents or to the adults or the people who felt more equity in their lives. It spoke to the people who were burned out and were working on things and having their boss dismiss everything they said. But really it's because we were talking about security of consequence. We weren't talking about how to protect credit cards better. We were talking about things that affected safety. And we're also talking about the image of hackers and the increased threat of criminalization. And since then, we've basically been having a rolling set of working groups at various conferences. We were invited to Blue Hat, Microsoft's elite invite-only conference. So we had a couple of days of working sessions there. Then ShmooCon, and then in B-side San Francisco, we had a 2-day workshop followed by RSA giving us booth space for 3 whole days, the largest security conference in the world. So we're somewhere between 300 and 500 participants of varying levels of activity, and we're really honing in on different types of work. So this is way too many bullets that they made us do at RSA, so I'm going to skip that. But it was founded by myself and Nick Prococo, early and active leaders. These are not C players. This is Katie Mazuris at Microsoft, who runs Blue Hat, who initiated the first bug bounty program in the history of Microsoft after they said they would never do a bug bounty program. She's co-authored and authored 2 ISO documents on coordinated disclosure, a very necessary skill we're going to need as we go to deal with these brand new companies who have never dealt with a hacker before or never dealt with a vulnerability being found in their product. Spacerog, we started a Hacker News Network and testified to Congress with his really bad hair many, many years back. Various different folks, Jay Radcliffe, who hacked the medical devices, and the list of folks is growing. A lot of them are quite introverted as well, who've been doing some of this car hacking. There's a group called Open Garages, a project out of Cincinnati, and this is a really introverted but really brilliant guy who's been teaching people how to hack cars and how to work with it, including automotive mechanics and people in industry. But here's our draft mission statement. To ensure technologies with the potential to impact public safety and human life are worthy of trust. So this is one of the reasons I'm getting serious, because I think the stakes have gotten serious. And we don't have enough of us looking at this. I don't want to find yet another bug in a mobile device platform that no one cares about. There's like 600 of them every single year. What I want is things that can affect public safety. If you're going to use your talent and you're looking for something arbitrarily to research, we're driving to drive people towards this. Now, I had coffee with Jeff Moss, the founder of Black Hat and DEF CON, right at the end of ShmooCon, and I basically made a heartfelt plea. Can you please add one track, just one track, at DEF CON this year that affects public safety? Even if you don't call it the cavalry track, just one thing, because what you ask for is what you'll get. And if you incentivize this research, you're going to get more people researching it, and we're going to get to critical mass. Now, I don't know if it was causal, but 3 days later when he put out the calls for papers, all but 2 tracks are about public safety. So I think we're reaching a point where at least the private sector community is much more interested in doing these things. So lots of ways to start getting engaged. And right now we're actually in the decisioning process of are we going to be a 501c3 educational foundation or a 501c6 professional industry association. And we're idiots, because the idea and the presumption that a bunch of ragtag hackers can do anything is preposterous. And yet, I've had tremendous little successes already in my 4 total days on the Hill in Washington in January and this past week. But we actually are having success, because this is how change happens. We got one car manufacturer. I'm not going to take direct causal linkage credit, but let's just point out that 2 world-class hackers now work at Tesla. And Tesla, without any industrial regulations, have now published free, of their own free will, a coordinated disclosure policy saying they will not sue third-party researchers. They've skipped the 10 years of suing people that most of these organizations go to and jumped straight to a recognition program where they'll actually put you on their Hall of Fame if you find something and work with them. So we're hoping that sets a tone in the free market that their competitors also have to at least meet and exceed this initial offering, and we believe that they're probably going to offer a cash bug bounty in the near future. We've also had similar successes with the medical device field. After Jay Radcliffe struck out with the FDA, we started collecting all the existing research we knew. So we went from collecting to connecting to collaborating, and we pooled all these different things, and each one of those researchers hit a different stone wall. They hit a different obstacle, but some of them were craftier than others. So what we found out is if the FDA won't publish the vulnerabilities, it turns out the Department of Homeland Security has an industrial controls cert, or the ICS cert, who will. So we started looking at what has worked and what hasn't worked, and what we also said is, okay, this tiny little hospital in the middle of nowhere isn't going to get any leverage, but the Mayo Clinic, they do bulk purchasing and bulk technology evaluation. So we looked at where the power levers were, and essentially we caused a scenario where the Mayo Clinic paid for and invited the CEO of one particular device manufacturer to come for a 2-day hackathon on a weekend. 3 different red teams came in and beat on these devices, found root access on all of them in front of the CEO of that division. And they've now added 12 new headcount for software security engineers and architects, again, of their own free will and volition. So even though we're idiots and we can't possibly succeed, we've already had a success in automotive, we've already had a success in the medical field. And we're trying to get people get this idea contagious and point more people towards this kind of thing. We're essentially fuzzing the chain of influence, right? So if you think about the kill chain, the Lockheed Martin kill chain referenced on several of the nice posters today, I mentioned it earlier, these things also have a chain of influence. We're not going to call it a kill chain. And we've essentially split up our work and our activities into 4 different pockets because they each have 4 different value chains. One of them is automotive security. One of them is medical device security, things like the FDA. One of them is home electronics because it's a very different set of vendors and market forces. And one's public infrastructure or industrial control systems. And it's our hope to fuzz each of those chains of influence and see what we might be able to accomplish. All right, so that ends the cavalry section and pace. But this is what I mean by getting serious. It's time to at least attempt to be that adult voice of reason. And it's not going to succeed, by the way. In fact, one of the reasons I was so thrilled to come here is I've always respected academia, but the private sector thinks they know better. They tend to reinvent the wheel over and over and over. And for some of these use cases where human life is on the line, we have solved this in academia. We know things. We know better development modalities. We know things like formal design, right? We know we don't have to use discretionary access control architectures in areas where it isn't appropriate. So we have a lot of the answers. We just haven't had the trigger to capture the hearts and minds of policymakers and average citizens to listen to those alternatives. So I don't think we're cutting from whole cloth. I think we have plenty of knowledge that's been locked away in academia or being reinvented constantly by egotistical rock stars in the private sector. But we have to combine those into a successful intent through result. And that's essentially one of the differences with the calories. We're not just going to throw more activity at it. We're doing activity towards outcome. So that ends that section. Now, I had a hard time choosing what else to include, but because the theme from this morning was really we need to boost up the human factors, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how I see people adapt to these changing environments. So I used to just draw this on a whiteboard for CISOs. We would do these like CISO roundtables for 2 days where you'd have like 150 to 200 and they'd be complaining about how they got breached. And it was all Chatham House rules and they were just getting overwhelmed. They're having like health problems and stress problems and whatnot. So I drew this on a whiteboard once. It's still just as true as it was then. We're beset on all sides by constant and turbulent change, right? The path of the righteous security professional is beset on all sides. And it's either changes in the threat landscape, changes in the regulatory landscape, changes in technology, changes in business, or changing economics. And now I'm calling it socioeconomics. But I got into security because I want to fight bad guys, right? I cared about the threat landscape. And that used to be our North Star. But unfortunately, with the rise of PCI and SOX and HIPAA and high-tech and GLB and all sorts of things, they're breeding like bunnies, compliance began to eclipse the threat landscape as the #1 driver of security spending, which would be fine if it was a valuable proxy for threat, but it's not. It doesn't prepare us for threat. It often makes us distracted from threat. So at a minimum, it could be a net new set of requirements, but it has completely eclipsed. I know Fortune 100 companies who don't even have much card data at all, who use PCI and only PCI as their entire risk strategy. These are publicly traded Fortune 100 companies. that do not a penny more than PCI. One of the CISOs I know and I work with, he deliberately puts PCI card data in different parts of the network so he can actually get an IPS device funded. He spreads the scope of PCI data when you're supposed to collapse it. I mean, these are the scrappy things that these guys have come down to, and part of it is around 2008 and 2009 when the economy turned, it basically drove a wedge between mandatory security and discretionary security. Now, the mandatory stuff gave you a budget, but it gave you a budget for our oldest and our least effective security controls. So that really kind of dominated and has dominated the security spending. And I knew that because as an analyst at 451, I had all the spending numbers. I called them PCI's chosen few. There were 11 technologies required by the standard, and those ones were recession-proof. And all these other great things were really struggling to get any budget. In technologies, that might have been x86 virtualization. It might be bring your own device. It might be cloud computing. It might be mobility, pick your favorite topic du jour. But those have a real impact on our traditional security approaches. You couldn't do antivirus and IDS the same way in a VMware environment. It didn't work that way. So we had to do additional effort just to get our old techniques to work the same or as good in these new modalities as we did prior. And then there were also academic and esoteric things like hyperjacking and new attack surfaces like the VM manager and whatnot. But that also made our lives harder. And then the business, the markets you're competing in, your supply chain, collaboration, talking and opening the doors more to your customer install base, various different board of directors type decisions could impact your business. And then we got our budgets slashed, right? It's not like we're growing our security staffs and our budgets at the rate of the threat. So we pretty much have constraints in those departments. So in the face of that, a couple things happened. And in the risk and metrics community, which I participate in, we often talk about frequency times impact and annualized loss expectancy and a whole bunch of stuff that ends up becoming very academic very quickly. And a lot of these are just really wild guesses. So I tried to turn it on its ear after talking with Dan Gear for a while, and I said, look, let's talk about this in a completely different way. How replaceable is an asset? You could argue that this is just a tweak on existing measurement types. But credit card numbers are highly replaceable. I was one of the ones affected in the Target breach. It was a mild inconvenience, right? At most, it's $50 of liability. It's a pain because all my direct payments got screwed up, but I get it back, no harm, no foul. You could almost say it's a victimless crime. Almost. And yet 99% of our time and energy is spent on protecting these pieces of plastic that are indefensible. Right? We haven't even migrated chip and pin. I'm not saying that's a panacea, but we haven't even tried it. So I'm pretty upset with that. Whereas this is coming at the opportunity cost and neglect of your trade secrets, your intellectual property, your human life. So less replaceable or irreplaceable assets. And this is going to come up again later. So because I want to stick with this theme of it's the people that matter, not the tech as much, or we've been overbalanced, I'm going to give you a little bit of a look into one of the ways I studied anonymous, false flags, the banking attacks like the Syrian Electronic Armies. A friend of mine, David Etchew, and I, we came up, this is the simplified version, but we came up with an adversary-centric model. And if you're in the risk metrics community, this is sacrilege. Most of these guys think it doesn't matter who's attacking you. As long as you harden the system, it shouldn't matter. And not only do they not like this model, they hate it. Hate this model. A lot of the risk frameworks either ignore outright or deliberately take out any aspect of who is attacking you. But back to the shark metaphor, these are the species of sharks, and they act differently. And they have different motivational structures, right? So without reading every single little bit to you, I just want to orient you. I think the single most important factor in these breaches isn't anything you did. It was who was after you. It was the presence of an apex predator. And we have various types of them, and not everyone faces every single one of these. So it might be nation states, it might be organized crime, it might be script kiddies, it might be hacktivists, it might be insiders, it might be the auditor. I treat an auditor no differently than an adversary. So if you map and you chain these, and you can have a data-driven model for this. I did at Akamai. I was able to spot false flags based on deviations in these chains. But essentially, if you map a who to a why to a what to a how, it's which adversary class is operating and playing chess and game theory within which motivational structure. Because that determines how they'll play. Are they target sticky or indeterminate? Then you can look at which assets that particular shark goes after, right? What's their preferred prey? Because that conforms pretty tightly. And then you can look at their TTPs or their tactics, techniques, and procedures and see if they're changing over time or if it's actually someone pretending to be someone else. Let me profile an example of this. So an activist is an ideologically fueled adversary. So they're not going to move on to a softer target if they're mad at you. If they hate the Motion Picture Association or the recording artists industry, RIAA or whatever, then they're going to be target sticky. Now, what do they attack? They don't attack everything. They pretty much go after web properties. The reason they were wildly successful is no one protected their web properties. They protected their card data. They didn't protect their web properties. So they were able to get knocked down easily and quickly. Even though there's tons of free and paid for solutions for DDoS, almost every single DDoS worked. They actually had a 1-800 number during the summer lulls where you could dial in and request a DDoS victim. But they pretty much only attacked web properties. And then they did DDoS and phishing and SQL injection. In fact, if you guys remember the Sony punishment campaign, there were 21 successive beatings of Sony after George Hott's video was taken down off of YouTube. The one that had 77 million credit cards, I said instantaneously to my wife that wasn't them. Now, we didn't even know that much about Anonymous yet. I hadn't even met any of the members of Anonymous yet. But I knew instantaneously. And the reason I knew is they never went after credit cards prior. And later, when we finally confronted Anonymous at DEF CON 19, and we were in a screaming match with them, it was revealed that they did, how many of the 21 attacks do you think Anonymous did? Anybody? 6. Anonymous did 6 of those 21. The rest were somebody else pretending to be Anonymous, right? In the fog and smog of war, right? It's easy. Anyone who claims to be Anonymous is Anonymous. They only did 6 of them. So who did the rest? And what did they get? Right. So that's one of the things you can tell. With a Zeus attack, for example, there was a bunch of DDoS attacks on banks. And the incident responders have to make real-time decisions. Is this a restore services type incident, or is this a distraction to buy time for money mules to perpetrate fraud? In the case of one of the Zeus ones, which is publicly documented, it was a weapon of mass distraction. The DDoS attack was actually to occupy incident responders and distract them. They could say we are Legion all day long. It was actually a Russian organized crime gang. So we use this in 2 ways. We use this as a tabletop exercise for executives to say which of these, choose your own adventure, which of these adversaries are you most concerned about? And then you can ghost out all the assets that they don't go after. They have no natural predators. And then you can focus on what are the countermeasures necessary for those particular assets against these particular foes. Now, you might be a bank and you might have all these adversaries and then you're just back to business as usual. But when I did this with one of the Fortune 100s who was only doing PCI, they asked their security team, well, I know we just passed our audit. How are we doing on our trade secrets and our financial data? And they said, we're not. He said, nothing? Not at all? He goes, you put out a memo. If it's not required by regulatory compliance, it's not getting a penny. I can show you the memo. He goes, no, I remember the memo. But he truly believed that those industry best practices applied to all of their asset kingdoms. So that simple bit flip didn't invent money, but now he's pulling in general counsel and others to basically find a risk model instead of a checklist model for balancing out their neglect on other asset types that are necessary for them as a Fortune 100. So I made these little baseball cards, and I'm going to go faster now. Same things as who to a why to a what to a how, right? So a script kiddie is motivated by profit and prestige. They pretty much only go after fungible assets. If they got your, fighter jet plans, they wouldn't know what to do with them, right? And their attack capability is basically Metasploit, free attack tools. They're script kiddies. They run scripts. The Rock Band network, the Russian business network, is very similar motivational structure, but they're much more talented. In fact, everyone talks about how awesome the Chinese hackers are. The Russians are way better. Way better. French are way better. So they will write their own malware and whatnot. State-sponsored adversaries motivated differently, right? They're much more target sticky. There's a military, industrial, economic motivational structure. They prefer intellectual property, trade secrets, industrial secrets. And they'll use custom malware, spear phishing, whatnot. And these are not exhaustive lists. I'm just trying to give you a baseball card, a thumbnail. Ideological, right? Chaotic actors is what I call it, the rise of the chaotic actor. Because they're chaotic good, chaotic neutral, and chaotic evil, all 3. They're in it for fun or for some grievance, right? So they're not going to move on to a softer target. They're going to go after who they're mad at. within their full exhaustion of their capabilities, which is typically, DDoS, SQL injection. Then there's the zombie auditor who sucks our will to live and our budget. They too have a motivational chain, right? No offense to the internal auditors. I met a very nice one today. But they're motivated by profit. It's a cottage industry, right? The only asset they care about is the card data environment or the CDE or the credit cards themselves. Everything out of that is out of scope. They could care less. They're not going to help you with your risk management. They're going to help you with your card data. And they have one TTP, the checklist. That's it. All right, so I introduced this concept of H.D. Moore's law. So let me get to that. Everybody knows Moore's law. Compute power doubles every 18 to 24 months. Depends on who you ask. So I'm essentially saying H.D. Moore's law is that the strength of a casual adversary or a script kiddie grows at the rate of Metasploit. H.D. Moore is the researcher who built the Metasploit framework. It's the largest open source Ruby project in the world. And essentially what I'm saying is if you can't handle Metasploit, the free version, you can't handle anyone. You must be this tall to ride. So it is a proxy for the weakest adversary. So just to chart this out, since we like charts, the success rate is the vertical. I'm saying when you do zero security, notice this really highly technical term called securons. I made it absurd on purpose. What I'm saying is that when you do zero security, you're zero secure, right? So you're going to have 100% of success rate for this particular adversary class, this green one. At some point, you do enough security that you exhaust their capacity. We like to tell ourselves that if we spend $1,000 more in security, we're $1,000 more secure. It's false. You don't realize gains until you've exhausted an attack capability or attack capacity. So that inflection point I'm calling H.D. Moore's law, and the bad news for you is it moves to the right every single day. There's new evasions, new payloads, new everything. It's getting better every single day. It's a very vibrant open source project getting contributed to by some of the best researchers in the world. Now, if you're availing yourself of it, you can neutralize the advantage to attackers because you know at any given time what they're capable of. The problem is only bad guys avail themselves of this tool. In fact, even the pen testing community hates it. They say, oh, it's beneath us. We use really cool stuff. Like, well, that's funny because the bad guys don't. They use this, right? They use this or poison ivy, some free attack tool. Now, I mapped other ones like this purple one is the QSA. You can make the auditor go away way earlier. So if that purple line kept track with the weakest adversaries, PCI would be a good standard. Unfortunately, it's very easy to make the assessor go away. It's much, much harder to be tall enough to beat even the weakest adversary. Chaotic actors are only slightly stronger than H.D. Moore's law just because they try a few more tricks if they fail the first time. Organized crime is much stronger, and then espionage campaigns, they'll reinvest. We've seen some espionage campaigns with more than a $4 million budget. SPAF may have better stats than that. So that's the nature of H.D. Moore's law. And that's H.D. Moore. He's so good, he's off the chart. Now, I bring this up really, really quickly because this is a really important point. 5 minutes. Okay. I'm not trying to poke an eye, poke a MITRE and NIST in the eye. But most people's patching strategy is to patch CVSS, Common Vulnerability Scoring System, number 9 or 10 or above, right? And most vendors tell you should only patch the really high ones. So I'll let you read this on your own, but Ed Bellis and Mike Reutman, and then Dan Geer put this in an IEEE document, I think. Basically, it's idiotic to patch based on 9s and 10s. Because if you pick a random 9 or a 10, it has a slightly less than 2% chance of being exploited in the wild. If you pick something in Metasploit, it has a 30% chance of being exploited. So it's a much better proxy or decisioning support. I'm not telling you to use H.D. Moore's law because I coined it. I'm saying the data supports that if it's in a free attack tool, it's 15 times more likely to be exploited than if it isn't. It had nothing to do with CVSS. And the NIST guys and the MITRE guys will tell you they don't expect you to make your decision based on that score. It's a base score. It should be combined with how critical the asset is or what other controls you have. But most programs, their patching strategy is 9s and 10s. And that's a very, very poor indicator. Right, so let me just, in my last 5 minutes, talk about zombies, right? This is probably my most throwaway idea, and it's probably my best idea on defense. So I'm a huge Walking Dead fan, huge zombie thriller fan. I'm going to use zombies, okay? This is basically the food guide pyramid for security. The stuff at the bottom gives you a fighting chance and might actually help you survive the night. The stuff towards the top is the empty calories. And I have some bad news for you. But if you're being chased by hordes of the undead and they want to eat your brains, which of these buildings are you going to go to? Right? So the key decision on surviving the zombie apocalypse isn't security at all. It's, are we choosing defensible infrastructure? Is it capable of being defended? Some things are more or less defensible. So often the CIO's decisions that you inherit determine if you're going to survive the night. So this is about choosing defensible infrastructure, which is why the rugged we're never going to make perfect code, but can we make stuff that's more defensible? You know, one of the things I love about iOS is it's a mandatory access control architecture versus Android, which is a discretionary one. So you could argue the merits of which one's easier to defend and how and why. That's not the only factor, but it's a factor. And the second most important part of this pyramid is, do your fellow survivors keep their wits about them and act as a team, right? So at the bottom is about reducing your attack surface. This is about reducing your entropy. Do you have rigorous change management processes? One of the Purdue alums, Gene Kim, in his seminal work that he did with several people here called Visible Ops, of all the things they studied in high-performing IT shops, 3 things mattered the most. Do you know what you have? Do you know when it changes? And do you have a zero-tolerance policy for unplanned changes? So by keeping the chaos and the noise down, you actually may be able to avail yourself of things like anomaly detection and things that go bump in the night. So this is really just keeping your wits and acting as a team and reducing that entropy. The third most important part of the survival pyramid, we're starting to dabble in security, but this is the OO in the OODA loop that Professor Spafford brought up this morning, which is observe and orient, right? We fight blindly. We're in the dark. We fight blindly and die quickly. We are so poorly instrumented. We don't have the flood lamps to tell us how many zombies are attacking from which direction. Are they even zombies? Are they werewolves or vampires? Because guess what? You need different weapons for each of those, right? So we are horribly instrumented. And I'm really happy to see things like, you know, network DVRs and different points of visibility. So we're starting to see more data points. We're seeing, you know, detection sooner, prompt and agile response, all that fun stuff. Now the empty calories, those are the wooden stakes and the silver bullets and the countermeasures for specific things. And they're useful in the context of having defensible infrastructure that's well managed and well instrumented. So you know who's attacking from which direction and how. You can use your precious little resources on their appropriate response. Now the bad news is when I mapped this against RSA or Black Hat conference papers, it was all on credit cards, our most replaceable assets, and it was all on specific brittle countermeasures. So the good news is in that pyramid, we're starting to go from the top layer down a little bit to things like, you know, NetWitness and Mandiant and more eyes and ears and security intelligence feeds. So we're starting to go down. I'm trying to get us to go straight to the bottom because that's where the real payoff is. And things like DevOps are game changers that are actually starting to introduce that. So I took too long on the front, so you're not going to see some of these awesome baseball cards other than 10 seconds each. Guess what? There's baseball cards for villains. There's also teammates and heroes in your environment. And in a longer presentation, I'll tell you how to use these guys. But your general counsel has a motivational structure, and they care about your trade secrets and intellectual property, and they have tools, and you can make them a hero. Procurement can be a wonderful asset on the base of the pyramid, such that as you're buying things, you're putting in terms and conditions and value levers in the procurement. So you're an unsung hero in procurement. The CIO, when properly equipped and informed, is making a lot of decisions on tools and infrastructure that could affect you. They don't care about data so much, but they do care about infrastructure. CTO, CFO, even the VP of sales can be an ally in the longer presentation. And every single one of these baseball cards had case studies behind it that my colleague and I put together. Audit, DevOps is a real game changer, et cetera. And what I did is I mapped these different players to the levels of the pyramid and who can you team up with to actually start and initiate a project down there. Now you guys aren't practitioners per se, but one of the takeaways you should see is there's a lot of human elements to these and knowing how to motivate each of these different teammates to help you at the more successful and asymmetric gain layers further down the pyramid. So just a few Pokemon matchups. The auditor, battle PCI compliance. They meet your internal auditor. You can defeat them, right? Victory. Oh, but let's tweak it a little bit. What if it's add a script kiddie? Well, we know it's not tall enough, right? Script kiddie can use Metasploit. Okay, what about intellectual property? Well, you bring in a state-sponsored adversary, you throw them up against your internal auditor who only cares about card data, how's that going to turn out? Bye-bye. Let's try that again. What if you bring in the general counsel who knows that if you try to sue someone for stealing intellectual property and trade secrets and you didn't take reasonable steps to keep your secret secret, you're going to lose that case. They know that, you don't. They know. Maybe add in a risk management person. Maybe add into procurement, right? So then you have a fighting chance. Here's the battle of the web properties, right? This was anonymous versus nobody. Nobody even bothered to show up. That's why it worked. Whereas it was pretty easy to defeat with a little bit of procurement, maybe some DevOps. Boom. So here's my departing thought. Our role going forward isn't to be a hero. We might have started out as a little kid and then we became a full-fledged superhero adult. Don't ask me how you go from a white male to a white female to Nick Fury as a Lego. But that's our job now, is we need to assemble the Avengers. We have to find the different heroes in our organization and activate them, because this isn't about tech. We have lots of tech to stop lots of bad guys. This is about motivation. Our incentives suck. So if we want to start hacking our future for things of consequence, it's time to start hacking the incentives. And I don't mean subvert them. I mean identify what makes people tick, what they care about, how to talk to them. And that's why I'm so encouraged that you have a cross-disciplinary program here. And my challenge to you is amp it up times 10. I want to see some more human factors, psychology, sociology, anthropology, economics. You're probably doing a great job already. Do even more. And with that, here's my contact info. And the last bit is, I am the cavalry, but so are you. Thank you.
We had so much information in that presentation. It's run a bit over on our schedule. And so what we're going to do is we're going to let you leave at this point. Josh will be here for a few minutes if you've got a burning question. He's also going to be around all day tomorrow at the symposium, so you'll have an opportunity to talk to him then. So rather than take questions now, we'll say thank you very much, and we'll see you at the symposium tomorrow.
Happy birthday, Scott!
Woo!